So one of the things that's unique about the Android operating system is the way that it notifies users of events. And it does it through the notifications bar here at the top. So depending on what your application is doing, oftentimes you'll see notifications come in here, like you have a new email or you have a new text message. So right now, obviously, I have no notifications, but now I'm going to show you how you can actually have your own application spawn status bar notifications. So let's go into Eclipse. Now I've just created a blank project called status. And in the main XML layout file, I've just replaced the text view with a button. So now let's go into our main.java file. And once again, we're going to get a reference to our button. I'm going to call it B, find view by ID, button, we'll cast it, and we'll set the on click listener. Because basically we're going to, when the user clicks on this button, we're going to create a status bar notification. Okay, let's get the class imported. And now we're ready to actually start writing our notification code. So the first thing we need to do is to get a reference to the notification manager service, which allows us to spawn those notifications. So I'm going to create a notification manager instance, and I'm just going to call it NM. And then here we use the get system service, and we pass in a constant from the context class, like we've done before. And the one we want to get is the notification service. So if I scroll this down, that's the system service we want. And now I'm going to have to cast this to notification manager. So we have this line here. Now we have this service with which we can use. Now I need to create an instance of the notification class. And this is where you set up all the properties of what's going to happen with that notification. And I'm just going to call this notify is equal to new notification. And for this, we're actually going to use this overloaded constructor in which we actually pass in an icon and then what we want the ticker text to be, and then when we want it to actually spawn the notification. So for the notification icon, like I mentioned in previous movies, we can use one of the icons that actually comes with the Android operating system, or we can create our own. But for right now, I'm just going to use one of the built-in ones. So we can find out what those are if we go into the Android jar, go down to resources, and then go into the drawable, let me give a little more space here, HDPI folder. And the way in which we can find out which ones are made for status bar is if we scroll down to stat. So this will give us all of the status bar icons that actually come with Android. And here you can see the battery notification sequence here for doing animations. I'm just going to use the stat notify more. And where's that? So actually don't want to double click that. We just want to put that in there. So I'm going to want to put android.r.drawable.stat_notify more. So there's our icon. Now we want to do the ticker text. So let me just go over to the emulator. So with ticker text, you'll notice when you get some notifications that the icon will appear, and then you'll have some text here that is potentially scrolling, basically telling you what the notification was for. It could be a part of the email or the text message it's notifying you about. I'm just going to put in some text here that just says, this is important. So now for this when parameter, this is how long from now do we want to spawn this notification? Well, I want to do it right now. So to get that time, we can just do system.currentTime milliseconds. This will return the current time. So we're not going to have any delay associated with this at all. So now we've created our notification. Now we actually need to do a couple of things to set up how things are going to look in the status bar notification window. So to make things easier, I'm going to get a reference to the application context. So I'm just going to create a variable here. I'm going to call it context. And I'm just going to say main.this, just so we have a reference to this. So the next thing we want to do is to create a string that's going to be the title of the notification. All of the notifications have a title and then essentially a piece of text underneath with more details. So I'm going to create a new car sequence, and I'm going to call this title is equal to you have been notified. And then I'm going to create another car sequence, and this will be, let's call it details. And we'll say continue with what you were doing. So now we have these two car sequences. Now we need to create an intent. And we went over intents in quite a bit of detail. But basically this intent is just going to hold the context and the current class or the current activity. So let's do that. We're going to create an intent, and I'll just call this intent. It's equal to new intent. And to this, I'm actually going to pass in first that context property that we created here. And then I'm going to pass in the main.class property like that. So we need to import the intent class. So now we have our intent, but the next thing we need to do is to create what's called a pending intent. And this is what the intent payload is going to be when the user essentially clicks on the item. So we're going to create a new instance of pending intent. And I'm just going to call it pending. And for this, we're going to do pending intent dot get activity. And to this, we can now pass in those items that we created. So we're going to pass in context, that property we created. Now this request code is actually not used at all in the Android system yet, so just put in 0 there. And the next one we want to put in is the intent, which is what we created here. So that's already in there. Then we're going to tab along, and then this last one for flags, we're just going to pass in 0 because it's not applicable here. So now we've created our intent and our pending intent. Now what we need to do is to set the event info for this notification. And this is where we're going to pass in all these items like the title and the details. So we're going to say notify set latest event info. And here again, we're going to pass in the context. And for this, we're going to pass in that title car sequence. Let's go back. This should be title. And then this one is going to be details. And then this last one is going to be the intent, which is pending. So now that we've done all of that, the last thing we need to do is to actually spawn the notification. So to that, we're going to use the notification manager. So nm, and we're going to call the notify function. For the ID here, we're going to pass in 0. This is a unique ID for each notification. We're just going to do one notification here, so it's going to be 0. And then now we pass in our notification instance, which is called notify. So let's go ahead and test this. Run it as an Android application. We'll let this load up. So here we have our button. And when I click on it, we can see that it's giving me this status bar notification, and we had that ticker text. And when I drag this down, we can see you have been notified, continue with what you were doing, and it gives you the time and the date. Then I can clear this, come back, and I can spawn it again. So anytime your application needs to really notify the user, this is the place to do it in the notifications window. Now we can do things like add audio to this as well. So let me show you quickly how to do that. So if you go into your exercise files in the assets folder, let me navigate to that. Exercise files, assets. Let's go into our resource directory here. And I'm going to create a raw directory, which is where we're going to store things like audio and video. And let's just go ahead and drag in this beep MP3 file. So I'm going to drag it into the raw folder. We're going to say copy files. So now what I want to do is when the notification happens, I actually want to play that sound. So all I have to do is come in here and Let me just come right under before we actually start the notification. And I can say notify.sound. And this is expecting a URI to the location of the sound that we want to play. If we want to get a URI to an asset that's included in our resource directory, this is how we do it. We import the URI class. We say URI.parse. And now we say, in quotes, Android.resource : And now we give the package name to our application, which is right here. So it's com.librimlo.status / and then now we give the ID that we want to get. So I'm going to concatenate onto the end of this that ID. So R, and then we're going to go into the raw folder .beep. So this is essentially how you can create a URL to reference a resource in your project. So now we've added the sound to that, so when the user actually clicks on the button to spawn the notification, we should hear it. Okay, so now our application is launched, and when I click on this, we can hear that the notification has happened, and we also heard the beep. You can see it happened again. So if we come through, and we can see it's not putting in a new notification because we're using that same ID to reference it. This is not a separate notification. Now, if we gave it a unique ID, it would add multiple notifications in here. But that's the basics of creating status bar notifications, and they're definitely the preferred way in which you alert a user to something important that happens in your application.